Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel. We are so excited to be here. My name is Alexandra Finkel, and I'm the Director of Talent and Inclusion at Bustle Digital Group. So excited to have you here. And I'm so excited to welcome my fellow panelists who are coming to us from across the world. We have people from who are based in Sydney right now, Riyadh, and Los Angeles, so all the time zones. I will start with some introductions, and then we'll move on to our discussion today. So we'll start with Yusuf. So born and raised in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, Yusuf Akbar went to Australia to study logistics. However, he found fashion was his calling, and it was while completing his degree in Sydney that he discovered he could study and train for a career in fashion. Using recycled and upcycled materials and by supporting local artisans in small communities in the Middle East and around the world, the Yusuf Akbar brand is built on the spirit of collaboration, creating ethical and responsible garments that not only make the wearer look good, but also feel good about wearing. Thank you, Yusuf, for joining us today from Sydney.
Thank you.
And next up, we have L.B. Mambatov, who's making international headlines in Marie Claire, Arabia, Forbes, Essence, Glamour UK, the list goes on, for all of her designs. And one of the hottest young designers of the year, she has taken the fashion world by storm with her bold luxury fashion and homeware collection. Living a true story of perseverance and redemption, Elle's journey of being falsely imprisoned in the UK for 2 years before the US government intervened to free her hasn't slowed the designer down. Thank you, Elle, for joining us from Los Angeles.
Hi.
And Bandar, having been in the industry for more than 11 years, Bandar Hawasawi has accumulated experience as a supermodel with yearly shows in Paris, France during Paris Fashion Week. Over time, he gained more recognition on the international level, which led him to the commercial world, national TV channels, and international radio stations in Europe. He became the ambassador of many international brands, and in December 2019, Hawasawi created his own fashion brand because he always wanted to own a brand that reflects his sense of fashion and use it as a tool to share his passion with the world through clothing. Thank you joining us from Riyadh today.
Thank you, Alexandra. Great to be here.
Awesome. So we will just get right into it and started. I want to start with a sort of personal discussion of identity and then move into diversity and inclusion sort of as that business model. And so starting out with this question, how has your identity played a part in your journey to where you are today? And Elle, I would love to kind of start with you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think for me, because I was originally born in Texas, that's the Bible Belt of America. So whenever I converted to Islam, it was this really difficult transition for me and in my fashion because I was really trying to figure out not only who I was in my own identity, but how I would then translate that into my designs and into my business and brand. So I still think kind of over time, even wearing hijab and then finding my identity in how I wear my hijab and, different things like that, it's just kind of growing over time. And you kind of see these transitions, like even in my fashion. That makes some sense.
Got it. And what about Yusuf? How has kind of your identity and where you're from played a part in kind of what you've built and created?
For me personally, I mean, in my journey, I've lived probably half of my life outside of Saudi Arabia, and it was very interesting seeing people's perceptions kind of change along that time. As a fashion designer and creatively, after designing my collections and seeing people's reactions for it, thankfully, I've actually found that me being Saudi a lot of the time has actually worked to my advantage because a lot of people were curious. What does a Saudi designer look like? What kind of work do they do? And in many ways, it worked as a unique selling point for me. And when I say that, I'm talking in the US, in Europe, in India, and in here in Australia. But having said that, there was also a lot of struggles. Before I started my own brand, especially when applying for jobs, uh, the name Yusuf Akbar wasn't really, the typical name of a job candidate. And to be honest, that was quite a struggle. It was very difficult. But now that I have my own business, I think it puts me in a very unique position, especially now when a lot of people are actually talking about Saudi fashion and Arab designers, and with the whole movement lately about diversity, it's been very positive. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And Bandar, how has that sort of influenced your background? Has it influenced at all, the fact that you wanted to start your own company after being a model for so long?
To be honest with you, Alexandra, my story goes way back. I started from a really, really young age. My father is a diplomat. I used to see him coming back home with a suit and tie, and he used to be always a great influence on me, teaching me as a young kid on the importance of first impressions and the importance of always being sharp and, representing yourself and manners on the best way possible. And I used to be taught from a really young age and how to put a tie on, how to, dress elegantly, and how that affects, how people treat you, how people look at you. So from that aspect, I accumulated a great understanding of the necessity of really representing yourself in that matter. And I feel like that fact puts me in a position to be looked at as someone who is influencing in the fashion industry. And it puts me in a position to lead and reflect on, how we are as a society really looking up and taking that to a next level here.
Got it. And one thing I am really curious about is diversity and inclusion are such buzzy words right now. Everybody is talking about it. But I imagine for you all, this might have been something that has come natural to you, and it maybe wasn't even something that at the beginning of your career, it was very natural and you weren't like, okay, I have to work to do this. And Yusuf, I'd love to start with you in this. Was this something that sort of came natural, and is this whole kind of trend right now, something that is very familiar to you?
Of course, diversity, is a very important subject for me, but it's not something that I've actually thought about and consciously tried to implement. It kind of just happened naturally, there was kind of like out of instinct. Being Saudi Arabian in the fashion industry, I'm already kind of part of that minority. And living in another country other than my country of birth, I was already mixing with a lot of people who are immigrating, for example, to Australia and are from very different backgrounds. So when working, it was only natural that I was working with these kind of people from very different backgrounds and ethnicities. But also, in my line of work, throughout my supply chain, it has also been very diverse. Whether it's because I'm looking for certain skills, for example, a lot of my beading and embroidery is done in India. A lot of fabrics that I would source, sometimes it would come from Italy or Greece or even Saudi Arabia. So it's actually quite difficult not to work in a very diverse way. So I believe it's super important for companies to, when they're trying to approach diversity, that it has substance and meaning behind it. It's super important that it's not just something at the surface. Only it's not just it goes beyond, I believe, photo shoots and different kinds of models. I think it needs to come from within, in the core of the company. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Elle, did you have anything to add as far as the ways in which kind of diversity and inclusion might have played a part in the way that you have built your business over time?
Yeah, so I think in so many ways, I feel like small businesses sometimes have such an advantage because there's not so much red tape that we have to cut through to kind of bring that vision to fruition. So one thing that I'm excited about in my business is being able to cultivate all of these amazing brands from, around the world. We have Saudi brands, we have brands from Dubai, we have brands from Cairo, Italy, and it's really exciting to be able to introduce these brands not only into a new market, but then internationally with Farfetch. And for me, it wasn't something that I was literally thinking, okay, I need to diversify. It was, there are so many amazing, talented brands across the world. How can we introduce these brands? How can people experience these brands in a different way that they've never experienced them before? So I can't necessarily say that, diversity and inclusion was my intention, but it was definitely about exposing the world to the craft that is amazing and that is in, all these different corners of the world.
Absolutely. And Bamjar, was that also something that you kind of felt when you were starting out?
Absolutely, absolutely. When we talk about diversity, to be honest, one of the many lessons that I've learned about diversity is the act of being culture relative. In anthropology, cultural relativism is the act of appreciating people from different cultures and different people's walks of lives. On the contrary, to being culture relative is ethnocentrism. A person who is an ethnocentric interprets the world by being critical of others rather than being appreciative of others. Let's take it on a business aspect, for instance. That if diversity is on the front, then businesses has the strategic power, balance, and positioning to create ripples of positive impacts. For example, let's refer back to the vision of 2030. His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stated that Saudi Arabia is using its investment power to create a more diverse and sustainable economy. For me, this version of a vision represents a prime example to correlate with what a results-driven business model would look like, diversity and inclusion at the center. Let's take it on a business scale, for instance. Businesses that makes relativism as a part of their business culture inevitably creates inclusion. For example, Vision 2030 is a model that has a direction and a robust trajectory of diversifying its economy and creating a vibrant society. And this is a great business model that I would like to highlight to put diversity and inclusion at the center as a business model.
Thank you. That's great. And one thing I kind of want to move on and talk about is the fact that because it is such a buzzy sort of thing right now, diversity and inclusion, at the end of the day, there is that question whether brands are doing it because they really feel that it's important or because, it's the trendy thing to do. In the States, there's actually been a lot of discussion about this and backlash on brands as they have been promoting Pride Month this month in June while supporting candidates who oppose LGBTQ plus equality. And this is something that really across the board we are talking about here. I'm curious, from your perspective, where do we fall into that? And Yusuf, I'd love to start with you. As far as, talking about that, are they really doing it because it's the right thing to do, or are they just doing it to do it?
This is something I feel very strongly about because unfortunately, even though it's always something good and positive to highlight diversity and speak about diversity and inclusion, but a lot of brands, when they do that, unfortunately, it comes across as shallow. And I said previously, it needs to come from within. The entire company culture needs to reflect that. Not just campaigns, photo shoots, and runways. That company needs to show that in their hiring, in their talent, throughout the supply chain. because it's really easy to, just have a photo shoot with a few different models, but the real test of diversity is within the company. And a really good example of that, Louis Vuitton, after Virgil Abloh became a creative director, you saw the talent inside Louis Vuitton completely changed, and the complete culture of the company changed to the better, and it was quite amazing. On the other hand, recently, a few days ago, the creative director of Zara just made some comments about, not including that there's no place for Muslims and Arabs in the fashion industry, and it was this exchange she had with a Palestinian model, and something like this is more reflective of the company's culture than a photo shoot. So, for example, if Zara just did a photo shoot with a few different models from different ethnicities, it would make you kind of doubt its authenticity when someone in such high position in the company is saying comments like this. And that's where I believe, companies should really start with diversity from within, not from the outside in.
Such a good point. And Elle, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that I found that sometimes there's almost like a lack of education. So, at the Beverly Center, what I try to push for, especially during Ramadan and things, is I don't want it to just be, okay, Eid Mubarak, like Ramadan Mubarak, and, it has to be something more than that. So I found that it's about education. There are so many different things. For example, whenever we're fasting, we break with dates. Why don't we, do a gift giveaway with date boxes and, things like that. It happens to come down to education a lot of times. And I feel like now, at least people, I hope, are willing to listen more. And so having that opportunity when people are listening to actually educate makes it a little bit easier. But I do find, of course, a lot of companies, they see the sale opportunity and, okay, let's just put something up. It's Pride, it's Ramadan, it's whatever. But at the same time, as small business owners or, as designers, we have the opportunity to actually educate, to help people do it in a way where it's not shallow and it's not just about money, but it is actually touching these communities.
Absolutely. And I'm going to follow up next with that education piece. And first, though, Bander, any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I totally agree with what Yusuf and Elle said. It's a matter of authenticity and being original and sticking really to the craft. And as Elle beautifully mentioned, it's part of our responsibility to educate and enlighten other people to really become aware to the whole situation when it comes to either building a legacy or just making a small profit from a brand and just moving forward. We've seen great examples of great brands who are here to build the legacy, with so many involvements. And when it comes to the social scales, when it comes sometimes on a political scale, that's what is happening with Zara now is something that we can definitely relate to. Also, on the other side of the coin, we've seen a lot of examples of brands who are just here to accumulate a little bit of profit just for other different reasons and just fade away after that. So it's just a matter of really sticking to the plan and the outcomes that comes that follows after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of going back to that education piece, Elle, one thing that I have always talked to people about is that it often falls to those who have underrepresented voices to do the education. And should people be doing the education themselves? Shouldn't they be reading and learning themselves? Why is it always the underrepresented voices who are, really taking control and educating everyone? How do you kind of feel about this? And, do you view yourself as an educator in this space?
I mean, I feel so appreciative, one, to have a voice, and two, to be able to have the opportunity to educate. I mean, there was a time where, I mean, especially in my life and just different things that I've gone through, where I couldn't get anyone to listen, you know, no matter how loud I was screaming. So I definitely don't feel burdened by the opportunity to educate. And I think for me, it also comes down in business to partnerships. You know, so when we partnered with Farfetch, it was a great opportunity to not only educate, but introduce certain brands on an international platform that you just wouldn't usually see. So when you go to farfetch.com now, you see like Yatagan, you know, a Saudi brand with an Allah necklace, you know, things like that. It's such an honor to be able to have these great partnerships and educate at the same time, because I feel like that's the only way we're eventually going to come together and actually learn about each other, is just that education.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I find on a personal level that I'm sort of in the same thing where I actually like being the educator. I understand people not wanting to, but I do really enjoy being in that role. And what about you, Yusa?
I wouldn't really want to call it the educator role or make it sound like it's some kind of burden, you know, because to be honest, like I take great pride of where I come from. And I don't really expect everyone to know everything about my culture. You know, there's so many cultures around the world, hundreds, maybe thousands. And it's impossible for everybody to know every culture and be aware of all the details about, you know, where people come from. So I find it personally, you know, really great. And it's a great way to start a conversation. And from a business perspective, purely business here, actually playing the role of the educator is a great way to really form a connection with whoever you're speaking to, whether they're a client, a customer. So it's a great marketing tool, because the more people understand about something, the more likely the more likely they can form a connection with it. And if they can form a connection with it, you know, they'll understand it better. And I think it's a really great thing. And like Elle said, you know, I'm just thankful that people are actually willing to listen. I mean, that's the first thing that we really should focus on, because, you know, if they're willing to listen, this means they're willing to accept. And yeah, no, I think it's a great thing that I take so much pride in.
That's great. And Bander, what about you?
I wouldn't prefer perceiving myself as an educator. You know, for me, it's a matter of energy. I feel like energy is really contagious, and whatever energy we bring to the table really affects the people around us. And especially when we talk about education, there's so many people are skeptical when we let's say share advice and share our knowledge. You know, many people don't really receive that the way we intend to. And so it's just a matter of really sharing energy and spreading love and good energy to the world. And I feel like it's part of our responsibility as a generation. It's part of our responsibility as youth. If we have the knowledge, you know, the only way to grow as a society is to share that knowledge, whether that could be straightforward, whether that could be in a really strategic, diplomatic way. The main message is to spread the knowledge and spread the information, regardless to what tool we use to deliver that message. So that's my take on it.
I just would like to add something on Bandar's comments about the energy. I have to say, not just recently since I started fashion, but in my entire life, I don't think I have ever spoken to anybody about my culture or where I come from and received a negative response ever. So this has also been very encouraging and a very positive kind of feedback for me to take on. And the more I speak to people about it, the more I see that positive response, the more I am encouraged to even, you know, take on that educator role. And it's great to see.
I love hearing that. And Elle, I feel like has that also been the case for you, as far as like that encouragement and the partners that you're working with really really loving that?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I was really nervous. I was nervous to convert to Islam because I didn't know what that meant. And I don't have any other Muslims in my family. And then I was nervous to wear hijab because I thought, will people treat me differently? What will it be like? And then I am a little bit of a stickler in business. So going back to that education point, I am always kind of trying to educate people to say, like, okay, I don't allow this in the boutique because, like, this doesn't, align with my religion. And if, of course, if it's a Middle Eastern brand or partner, that's easy to say. But then when it's a European partner and they don't really know anything about this culture, I get nervous sometimes because I am having to say, oh, sorry, like, I don't allow any faces, or I don't allow this, so I'm thankful for the positive feedback that I've gotten, because initially I was very nervous and scared. And of course I want to grow as a company and as a designer and, bring more brands. But at the same time, there was that nervousness of, like, will I be accepted, and will people understand where I'm coming from, and will it be okay? And, like, thanks God it's been okay, but yeah.
Absolutely. You are all veterans of this industry, and I'm curious, what are some of the things that you've seen that has changed over time? And, if there are certain things that you feel like, oh, now people are talking about. But yeah, I'm curious, Yusuf, like, what are do you feel like there is progress in certain areas?
Absolutely. Huge progress, which is really great. I remember when I first started shooting my first lookbook and having kind of hired dedicated PR to manage my PR. One of the comments I first got is not to use a model of color because you need to relate to your customers directly. And when I'm saying customers directly, I'm talking in Australia and America, and that's where we were planning to kind of target our marketing. I found that really strange, and it kind of really hit me. I didn't know how to deal with it. It's my first year in the fashion industry, so I'm just, I was kind of in shock because I didn't expect such comment. But moving to today, I just had my show in Fashion Week here in Australia 2 weeks ago. If a designer didn't have a complete, collection of models of different ethnicities and shapes, they would kind of be pointed out, and not in a positive way. So going from that to that is definitely been, a huge change, even though it took a few years, but it's always great to see this kind of thing. Yeah.
I love that. And it is such an interesting point that you have, that if there was a designer who put out a collection out there with no diversity in those models, I do feel like people would definitely point that out, which is not a bad thing.
I just want to add one more thing, actually, which is a little funny story. I hope I have time, but during my casting process, actually, we had a very limited budget for our model. So I contacted all the agencies saying, hey guys, I could only afford that much for each model, but I don't want to underpay anyone. So could you please show me or please send me the models that you that are able to do it for that much. I was very surprised that all the models that I got were of a certain look. They were all Caucasian, and I was quite shocked. And as I spoke to my partner, I said, wow, luckily we've got a lot of model friends who are willing to help us that are from different backgrounds. And imagine if we didn't, we would end up with, for example, all white models. And, it's funny, we couldn't afford diversity, for our show, which is something, a bit strange to say, but, and if people would watch our show, they would probably think we are like, anti, either anti-African or Asian or whatever it is, and sometimes it actually can be surprisingly difficult to be diverse, and that's why it's very important to have diversity come from within the culture, so it's so embedded that it's not just at that surface level. And if sometimes you couldn't be diverse at a certain area, that you have so much work showing diversity that it doesn't matter sometimes.
Absolutely.
I mean, nothing doesn't matter, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even though it is challenging and possibly expensive, that is what brands need to do. Yeah, and Elle, what have you seen over time? Any changes or things?
I think for me, I mean, I completely agree with you, Sif. When I first started out, even though I'm a Black designer, I had mostly white models, like at the beginning. So, yeah, I completely agree. And I think for me, I mean, even with my design aesthetic, I feel like there is an appreciation now for something that's different. Whereas before, everything needed to be very commercial, and designers, we had a lot of pressure to make something that was very commercial. It would sell, across the board internationally. And now there is an appreciation for diversity within the design, which is great. Because I feel like in so many ways we don't have to compromise so much of ourselves to actually create what we love.
And Sandra, as a model, I feel like you must also have an interesting perspective on that.
Absolutely. We've experienced tremendous changes during the past few years. I'm talking, and specifically here within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Of course, with the help of Ministry of Culture, we've seen a formulation of the Commission of Fashion. Of course, from this position, I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation and gratitude to the delegated CEO and Her Royal Highness Princess Noura bint Faisal. We've seen tremendous changes within the industry overall when it comes to being a model, when it comes to being a business entrepreneur. We've seen tremendous growth, and I can tell you this is per minute. It keeps on going further and further, and there's so many strategic plans coming in the near future, and we're just so proud. Like it's just a place to be really, really proud of, to live through this generation, experience this kind of change. I think for the upcoming generation, they will just come to this place with just the recent changes, and they wouldn't know exactly what happened except through history books. But for us to have the pleasure to live through it, it's something to be really proud of, and great to be within that.
Thank you so much. And as we sort of close out today's session, I'd love to hear just what you are seeing for the future and what's next in this space. Elle, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I think something really exciting for us that we're doing right now. We're bringing 500 Saudi and Middle Eastern brands into this market, and I'm really excited for people to truly experience some of the most amazing brands that I know exist. And, I'm really happy to see, with my partners at the Beverly Center, things that we can do. Like, during Ramadan, we have special Ramadan hours and, those type of things. Like, I'm really looking forward to seeing people actually embrace diversity. It's great that we have a conversation about it, but actually embracing it and then having an action with it is what I think is really important.
And what about you, Yusuf?
For the future, I mean, I couldn't be more excited, honestly. And it's as Bandar mentioned, I mean, the way the industry is moving in Saudi Arabia and globally, it's been absolutely amazing, and it's beyond my wildest imagination. I mean, when I was a kid, I could never have dreamed of being a fashion designer, let alone being a women's wear designer. I mean, going to kind of the opposite side. I mean, as a man, I couldn't be a women's wear designer in Saudi Arabia. I mean, that was something very out of the norm. And not just only being able to do what I do today in Saudi Arabia, but encouraged to do it is something truly amazing to see. And the industry is about to boom, and with all the support that's coming from the Ministry of Culture, Her Royal Highness Princess Noura, and the CEO of the Fashion Commission. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of where they're going, and they're definitely pushing things in the right direction, and trying to kind of set the tone for everyone in the world and set the example of how a fashion industry should look like. And I couldn't be prouder of this.
Well, that is all of the time that we have today. Thank you so much, Yusuf, for really ending us on a great note. I want to thank you all for being here today and sharing your experiences and stories. And I, too, really look forward to the future. So thank you all. And now back to you, Tigreed.